Thank you guys for joining me today. This is our forms deep dive. So I'm going to, without further ado, jump over to the MLS, the SkySlope forms. And again, in our chat, we had a couple of requests: the buyer's cancellation and subject to seller acquiring new residents. So let's go down here to adding forms. All right. We've got cancellation or termination of the buyer broker agreement and of the exclusive right to sell. And so let's add both of these. Okay. And then we'll jump over to these two and see them. All right. One of the things that I want to talk about really quick with you guys is occasionally, and by occasionally, I mean at least every month, I see, and I've been guilty of this in the past, of agents talking about how liberating it is to fire a client, right? We've all worked with those nightmare people that they're rude, they're mean, they're not taking any of our advice, they are wasting just buckets of time, and you really feel in your heart that either they're never going to go anywhere or that this is just a really bad relationship and you don't want to continue it on for your own mental health or whatever, right? We've all had those people. If you haven't, it's just a matter of time. You will have those people. So what do we do with them? Can we just fire our clients? And to put this in perspective for you, can they just fire you? They decide that you're not the person for them. They've got another real estate agent they've been talking to. Can they just fire you at any point in this transaction and walk away? And the answer, of course, is no. That's why we have a contract. But we have a contract that goes both ways. And so when you're an agent and you're talking about how liberating it is to fire a client, you don't get to do that. Now, I didn't realize this. And again, one of the unique things about being a principal broker for 2,400 agents is I get to see lots of crazy stuff. And about a couple years ago, the first time I saw one of our agents get sued for terminating a contract. And their client sued them because they had violated their agency agreement. Okay. Anyways, that was interesting, right? I mean, how often do we see a client clinging so tenaciously to their agent? But you do need to understand that if you decide to cancel either a buyer agency agreement or an exclusive right to sell agreement, that it's not a one-party cancellation. This has to be both sides agreeing to cancel. And therefore, we have forms that allow this. Okay, so here we have the cancellation of the exclusive buyer broker agreement. And so we've got the company name here and the buyer's name here and the date that we entered into our agreement. It's a mutual termination. Both parties agree to mutually release each other from any and all obligations, claims, liability, and demands arising out of the agreement, including but not limited to the agreement's protection period, unless checked below. So you could check this box. And again, in your buyer agency agreement and exclusive right to sell, there's a protection period. So for example, if I jump up here to the exclusive buyer broker agreement, then we have a protection period down here of, let's say, 6 months. If we, in this cancellation, check this, this box, then that 6-month thing is still in effect. So basically somebody could say, we want to end this arrangement with you because we plan on not purchasing a home. If you think that that's a little bit sketchy, then you can say, okay, but we still have this protection period in place. So if you change your mind, we've got that. Honestly, I wouldn't do that. Here's the reason I wouldn't rely on this. Like, if you're going to cancel the agreement and make it clean. Otherwise, we go back here and we go to this protection period. And it says that any person, let's see, if within 6 months after the termination of this agreement, anybody working on the buyer's behalf enters into an agreement to purchase any or lease any other property, then they agree to pay the brokerage fee referenced in section 2. All right. So we do have this protection period built in here. However, if we look at, let's see here. And again, this is something that it was a property referenced above, something that we had shown them. But if we look at this same thing with the exclusive right to sell, this protection period, unless the seller is obligated to pay a brokerage fee to another brokerage based on another valid listing agreement entered into after the expiration or termination date of this listing agreement. Okay, so we don't see that same language here with the buyer agency agreement, that, you know, that this agreement ends and they've entered into another one with another person. However, here's what we don't want to be involved in. We don't want to be involved in lawsuits with clients, because those are bad news and they're ugly and they get drawn on way longer than you might think. Just to give you an example, I saw one lawsuit over a fairly minor issue. This was a buyer and a seller suing each other. It was over a $5,000 issue. It drug out for 2 years and there were over $40,000 in attorney's fees. So when agents come to me and say, hey, can't we sue this person? Yes, we can, but you have to understand that this is not a simple process. Our legal system is not easy, it's not clean, and it's not fast. And if somebody wants to fight that, they can fight it and make it very expensive. And then what happens most of the time is, even if you win a judgment. That doesn't mean that you walk out of the courthouse with cash in your pocket. It means you walk out with a piece of paper saying that somebody owes you cash. And if they don't have any cash, then you never get it. Okay. So again, this is a mutual agreement here in this exclusive buyer broker termination. And my advice to you is, if you're going to terminate it, make it a clean cut. Don't check this box that agreement's protection period is not canceled or terminated, because doing so muddies the water and it increases the likelihood of misunderstandings or people being frustrated and threatening to sue each other. And honestly, you should just be moving on cleanly if you're using this. If you've spent a bunch of time, if sometimes they just want to compensate you, they feel bad that they've taken so much time and then changed their mind, they can put money in here. Okay, so let's say that they want to give you $500 for your time. Great, they're going to pay you $500 and it's done and it's effective the date that we sign. So basically effective immediately. All right, now this $500, by the way, they need to make this out to the brokerage. So they'll make it out to Equity Real Estate, and that money comes into the brokerage, and then we can pay you that money. But you cannot collect money directly from a client. Let's look at the exclusive right to sell one as well. It's almost identical, same thing. We've got a protection period that is or is not canceled. And again, we've seen that the exclusive right to sell agreement has a little bit different language in there, where it does specifically say that after the termination of this agreement, if they've entered into an agreement with somebody else, then that protection period is void anyways. So again, my advice to you is, don't cancel the agreement, but leave the protection period in place. All right. What you can do when we're talking about selling, if I go back to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Oh, this is an outdated version. Let's get the updated version. All right. Okay, so if we're looking at the updated version here in this, we've got this agreement, for, let's say that it's out for a year. All right, so we've got a listing agreement that's good for a year. And just so that you guys know, please make sure that you are reading the actual language. Okay, I see agents all the time put in the effective date of today. Okay, maybe it's because you clicked on it and it pulled up a calendar. And so you just thought, oh yeah, that makes sense. But all you have to do is go up here and read that it ends at 5 p.m. on today. I've just signed an agreement for 7 hours. Guys, that doesn't make any sense, right? So make sure that you know what you're clicking on. If you're going to click on this thing, Don't look for the easy thing. That's anybody could do that. You guys are getting paid to read the form. So know what you're clicking through. So let's say that we do this for a whole year. I want to cancel that. See, I wonder if I can just type that in. I can't. That's a pain. I want to go to November 8th, 2023. So I've got a 1-year agreement here on this property. And let's say that 4 months into it, my client calls me and says, you know what? We're tired of showing the home. We've decided that we don't want to sell it anymore. Okay. This is something that comes up. It's fairly common. In fact, we were dealing with this just yesterday with one of our agents. We do have the option to jump down here and terminate this listing agreement, releasing each other from any and all obligations, claims, liabilities, and demands, all right, including the protection period. All right, we do have the option to do that. However, let's say that you're getting a little bit of a vibe and you're worried that you've put in some time into this and that the client may be talking to another agent. And so they're trying to terminate this with you and sign with somebody else immediately. And you've put in time and all those other things. Now you could say, you know what, if they don't want to work with me, that's fine. I get it. I don't want to work with them either, but they need to compensate me for my time. So I'm going to put $1,500 in here. And if they'll pay me the $1,500, that pays for my photo tour. It pays for some of the work I had done to help get the house cleaned up, whatever. You can do that and you can certainly walk away from it. But you also have the option of just getting written instructions from them to take it off the market. And just say, okay, send me written instructions to take the property off the market and I'll take it off the market. Now the listing won't be terminated, but this means that if, because we've got if we go back up here to our exclusive right to sell, we've got a year agreement. We're only 4 months into it. And so the listing isn't going to be terminated in this case. I'm just going to follow your written instructions and take it off the market. And then when I go to the MLS, I'm just going to change it to an off-market status. When it's an off-market status, you still have an active listing agreement in place. They're just saying that for a while, they're tired of showing it. And so we're going to honor that, take it off the market. But if they do talk to another agent and that other agent goes to try to list the home, they won't be able to, because this listing is still active under you. It's just off market, meaning you're not allowing showings and stuff for now. Okay. So if it's off market, by the way, again, you're not doing any form of marketing for it, because that would be a violation of the MLS rules. So it's truly off the market.
Didn't they change that though on the MLS? Doesn't it say like active - no show now?
On the status of listings?
Yeah. Because I have some, and what I read on the MLS was that they still have an active contract, but they're not allowing showing. So like I have some in my favorites, and that's what it says. It's the tab on it, like on my phone, on my favorites list is blue, and it says active - no shows, like showing that there's an active contract, but there's no showings.
Who knows about that? Who else has heard about it?
Eric,
Yeah.
it's Rebecca. Hey, I just looked and she's right. The off-market status is gone. It's active no show. So that could
Okay.
be you use it at the front end or the back end, in the middle.
Good. Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Good. Thank you. So I want to go to this clear cooperation, because so basically what I've said is all the same. They've just changed the term. So and I think they've changed that term to clarify for agents that would poach. And they're saying this is an active listing, but we're not allowing showings, because if it shows withdrawn, a lot of the agents that are poaching think, oh, it's off the market, I can contact that person and try to get a listing, which they cannot, because you do have an active agreement in place. Does that make sense, Rachel? So Everything that I said is the same. They've just changed the terminology on it.
Yeah, I was just bringing that up since it's a
Thank you.
recent.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate that update. And I'm grateful for it because, again, we're dealing with that stuff exactly right now. Okay, so I do want to dive into, since this is a deep dive, let's take a look at this clear cooperation policy, since we're talking about having an active listing that is not on the market. Okay, let's see if it actually, what's the difference between active and off-market listing statuses? Okay, an active
Eric, can I
status,
ask you a question?
yeah,
So I have somebody who was trying to sell and purchase a new home. Well, with interest rates, they now can't purchase that new home, so they took their home off the market. So I still have the agreement with them until December 1st, but I'm worried to change that to it. So once my contract with them runs out, I'm going to change that to, would it be canceled?
what is it they're trying to do?
Well, they're no longer, so they can't buy the home that they were planning to, that they were building, because they couldn't get theirs sold. So, our agreement right now is just off market, but December 1st, our contract runs out. So I'm going to have to change it to, I'm in here right now trying to look, it'll be that our period is over, our, contract period.
Yeah.
I'm afraid when I change them to expired, they're going to get a million calls from agents and be ticked.
They will.
It's going to be like opening a new wound, but there's nothing I can do to help that, right?
Either they have an active listing with you and they extend their listing, or yeah, they're going to be off market and they're going to get contacted.
Okay.
Or
All right.
expired and contacted rather.
Eric,
Yeah.
and also she won't need to change it. The MLS does that automatically with the ending of your listing date.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
If I understand you correctly, Katie, that's,
Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
So thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so let's go back to this active and off market, just so that you guys understand the difference. An active status means it must be available for showings within a reasonable period of time, which is generally within 5 business days after the listing has been placed in active status. Okay, and that's active marketing both in the MLS and any other marketing methods. So a sign in the yard, on your Facebook page, anything like that, has to be available for showings within 5 days after active status. So you could have it active on the MLS. Let's say you put it active on Monday, but the clients didn't want any showings until Saturday. That's okay. That's barely within the 5 days. And you could just put in the agent remarks, no showings till Saturday. Okay. Anything longer than that could be a violation of this policy. In the off market status, or now it's called active, what was that term?
Active no show.
Active no show. There we are. Rachel sent me that screenshot. Active no show. If it's active no show, means it's temporarily not available for showings, and temporarily could be for the remaining 8 months of the contract if you wanted to, per the seller's request, for a period of time that generally exceeds 5 days. Off market or active no show status listings are not actively marketed while in this status because it's off market. It's not available to show it. All right. And then days on market are not accumulating in the MLS when you have that status. Okay. So if we go back to our form and we want to, again, if we're getting this vibe from somebody that they may be dealing underhanded with us, then you can, of course, just say, okay, great, I'll take it off the market. Our listing agreement will remain in force until November 8th of 2023. That's what we originally signed, but there will be no showings or anything. So I'll do exactly what you're telling me to do, what you want, which is taking it off market. And if they push that and say, no, I want our agreement canceled, then we say, oh, that's an entirely different discussion. Okay. Because what you told me was you didn't want it shown. All right. You're tired of showing the home. And so we can do that with off market. If you're telling me you want it canceled, the reason for that isn't that you don't want it shown. It's typically because you want to list it with somebody else. Is there somebody else that you would like to list it with? And if they say, no, I just want to be done with you, then again, this is a decision you can make. You can say, okay, we can be done right now. This is what it's going to cost because I have some real costs in here. And folks, this isn't even accounting for your time. You can set whatever you want as a cost for terminating. You don't have to provide receipts. You don't have to provide, you know what, I had the lawn mowed, my kid mowed the lawn for $20 or something like that to help you out. I see agents doing this all the time. They've paid to help clean a home. They've paid to have the lawn cleaned up. They've put all of this in, and a seller gets really nasty and says, I want receipts for everything. No. Okay, we have a contract to sell the home. I did all this stuff to help sell the home, and now you want out of that contract. I will let you out for this, and I don't have to provide receipts. Okay. So anyways, that's how that cancellation agreement works. Any questions on that for both buyers and sellers? No? All right. I want to look at one other form of canceling. So this is when the buyers want to cancel the purchase contract. All right. So we're going to go look at this one. And this is the one that came up in the UAR legal advice that I shared with you guys this week. Again, so we're listing out the brokerages here. And then we've got a couple of different reasons to cancel. All right. One, we want to cancel the REPSI prior to the due diligence deadline. Folks, if you're past the due diligence deadline, you're not going to check this box. Okay. And that's exactly what we had just a couple days ago. One of our agents, not in our brokerage, but with another broker, and I'm on the phone with the broker, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate this mess right now. And we jump in and we look at the contract, and they've checked this box, but it was canceled after the due diligence deadline. We came down here and we looked at the date, and it was after that deadline. That doesn't make any sense, guys. So when he says in his legal advice that we shared this week with you to make sure you're checking the appropriate box, pay attention to these details. They matter a lot. All right, so let's say that we have passed the due diligence deadline. So we want to cancel now after due diligence, but prior to the financing and appraisal deadline. All right. If we've canceling, let's see here. So here we're referencing section 8.2A, in which case the earnest money deposit shall be released to the buyer. And if we go to the real estate purchase contract, which is right here, let's go to 8.2A. And this is what I would want you guys to do, by the way, is if you're canceling, I would like you to pull up the contract itself and read and see, okay, what exactly applies to our situation. So let's say that we've marked that it is subject to an appraisal condition. If we've marked is not, we can't cancel based on 8.2A. But if it is, then we have a right to cancel. If after completion of an appraisal, we get written notice from the lender that it has appraised for less than the purchase price, then we can cancel by providing written notice to the seller, which is this form that we're looking at right now, with a copy of the notice of appraised value no later than that financing and appraisal deadline. So we could come down here, provide this written notice with a copy, notice of appraisal value is attached. And that's here just to remind us that that's what's required if we're canceling under that section. If we're canceling under section 8.3BI, let's jump over to that. Which is financing. Okay, and so again, we didn't check that no financing was required, otherwise we wouldn't be able to cancel under those. But let's say that we did check the financing was required, and we have a right to cancel before the financing and appraisal deadline. And again, if this is the case, if we're not satisfied with the terms of the loan in the buyer's sole discretion, then we may, after the due diligence deadline, cancel this no later than the financing and appraisal deadline, whereupon blank amount of the buyer's earnest money deposit shall be released to the seller. So we could say, let's say that we did $1,000 earnest money. We could say, you know what, even if we do cancel, we'll give $500 back to you, or we could put in 0. Okay, none of our earnest money will go back to you if we cancel based under the finance and appraisal deadline. And what I see some agents do is they look for a blank and they say, oh, we've got $1,000 earnest money, and they read buyer's earnest money and they won't go in, type 1,000, in which case they've canceled and they still lost all of their earnest money because they didn't read the language in the form. Okay, so this is just saying if we cancel, how much of our earnest money is actually going to come back to us, and how much are we going to voluntarily give to the seller for this cancellation. All right, so if we canceled under section 8.3bi, the earnest money deposit shall be released in accordance with that section. And again, that section says that either all of it goes back to the buyer, or if we've agreed to release a certain amount to the seller, then we'll be following that language. Now, there are other things we can cancel on. Okay, so if this isn't one where multiple things apply, it's going to be one of these different boxes apply. So you'll notice that I don't want to, it does allow me to, I could check. Okay, only one checkbox in this group can be active actually. So that's good. So, but I can come down here and I can check, okay, maybe it's 8.3bii, which is after the financing and appraisal deadline. Now, what is the benefit if we jump over here and scroll down to 8.3bii? We have a right to cancel after the finance and appraisal deadline. So I'm going to stop this really quickly so that I can see you guys. What is the benefit to canceling after the finance and appraisal deadline? Why would I want to do that? I mean, is my earnest money protected at this point? No. Okay, so why would I want to cancel after that deadline? Anybody?
Possibly if the loan falls through, maybe with the interest rates going up, the buyer no longer qualifies and they can't be held responsible for purchasing it.
Okay, yeah, they wouldn't be held responsible for purchasing it. They've missed their finance and appraisal deadline. They're not going to get their earnest money back. So
To avoid contract, right, Eric?
To avoid what?
Avoid breach of contract.
Yeah. So thanks, Alan. This is I'm going to go back and share the screen, but this is something that a lot of agents don't understand. So if we go to 8.3bii, if after the financing and appraisal deadline, we fail to obtain the loan, which is what Cindy was talking about, meaning that for whatever reason, the money wasn't delivered to the lender or the escrow closing office as required under section 3.2, then we shall not be obligated to purchase the property, and buyer or seller may cancel by providing written notice to the other party. So that's the written notice that we're talking about. Now, if it is canceled as provided in 8.3bii, then we agree that all of that earnest money deposit shall be released to seller immediately. And here's the key point, and this is what Alan said. Seller agrees to accept as their exclusive remedy that earnest money deposit as liquidated damages. Liquidated damages is a legal term that means that that's all you get and there ain't no more. All right. So you don't get to accept earnest money and then go ahead and sue for further damages. You're going to accept this as liquidated damages, meaning that's all you get and you're going to walk away from the deal. And it further elaborates and says, buyer and seller agree that liquidated damages would be difficult and impractical to calculate because we could get into things like, well, we've had it off the market for this much time. And because of that time, our time is worth $1,000 an hour. And so you owe us, you know, it was off for 2 weeks, which 24 hours a day and 2 weeks. I mean, we could be insane with this, right? That would be impractical to calculate. And so the earnest money deposit is a fair and reasonable estimate of seller's damages in the event the buyer fails to obtain the loan. So this is saying we've canceled after our finance and appraisal deadline. We realize that we're going to lose our earnest money, but we are protected still. And what are we protected from? Like Alan said, we're protected from default. Okay. So this is not canceling after the finance and appraisal deadline, but prior to settlement is not considered a default. So if the buyer did default, meaning that they failed to cancel prior to that settlement deadline, now the seller has 3 different remedies that they could choose from. They could cancel the REPSI and retain the earnest money deposit as liquidated damages. That's one option. And that's the only one that they're given if we cancel prior to settlement, but after the financing and appraisal deadline. Or they could keep that earnest money deposit in trust and sue the buyer to actually enforce the REPSI, force them to sell the home or to buy the home, which is kind of impractical. I've actually never seen that happen. But what I have seen happen is we can say, look, we're going to give you your $1,000 earnest money back, but we're going to pursue other remedies available at law, which means we have actual damages that we think are far in excess of this $1,000 earnest money. So you can have your $1,000 back, but we've already moved because you waited to cancel after the settlement deadline. And because of that, we had in good faith moved out of the home already. So now we've got moving expenses. Okay, now we have to carry the home and we have to pay a mortgage on it. Now we're paying a hotel bill. And I can itemize all of those expenses. So if I stop sharing here, I can itemize all of those expenses out, and that bill could get up there pretty high, right? We're way over $1,000 now. When we've talked about a mover and hotel bills and all of this other stuff, I could easily get in the $20,000, $25,000 range. And so if I've got a seller that has really incurred these costs, those costs can easily be, I can have receipts for everything. I could take that to court and say, look, we did our part. We were prepared. The home was clean. We moved out on time. They canceled after closing or failed to show up at closing at all, which is by definition default. And so now we have this remedy available to us. If the buyer had canceled prior to settlement deadline, then that would not be a default. Even though they failed to close on the home, by definition, that's not a default because we do have that section in there that specifically addresses cancellation based on that section there. So when we go back here, we've got this section right here. Okay, notice of cancellation. All right, so there's other ways that we can cancel. We've got the subject to sell a buyer's property addendum. Maybe our property failed to sell. We've got the FHA VA loan addendum. We've got a backup contract. Okay, whatever. There's different reasons that we could cancel. We need to make sure that we're canceling with the proper reason. Okay, and then the earnest money deposit would be released in accordance with the governing provision of the specific addendum or provision checked right here. Okay, so just for fun, since this is a deep dive, let's go to the REPSI and look at section 20.2 and see why we would cancel based under risk of loss. Okay, 20.2 is if prior to closing, any of the property is damaged or destroyed by fire, vandalism, flood, earthquake, or act of God, the risk of such loss or damage shall be borne by the seller, provided that the cost of repairing that doesn't exceed 10% of the purchase price. So if we've got an earthquake that comes through or the house is burned down, obviously you're not still bound to buy that. So you could cancel based under 20.2 and provide written notice, which is using that proper form that we've been discussing, in which case the earnest money deposit shall be returned to the buyer because there was an act of God there or a fire or whatever. Okay, so that covers that one. Subject to sell a buyer's property addendum. We've covered this before in other trainings. Basically, it means that we made this offer subject to the sale of our previous property. And since we weren't able to sell that property, we're not able to perform on this. So we're going to cancel based on that subject to sell of buyer's property addendum. And if we jump up here to that addendum, then we have again a right to cancel before the due diligence or finance and appraisal deadline, whichever is later. So we can use either one of those. And of course, if we're writing this addendum, then we would want to make sure that we have at least one of those deadlines in place. We certainly wouldn't want to waive those deadlines, which we saw in some of the craziness of the last couple of years. But buyer may cancel in their sole discretion if they haven't closed on the sale of their property no later than the due diligence or the financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later, and the earnest money shall be deposited or shall be released to buyer immediately. Or buyer's right to cancel after the due diligence and financing and appraisal deadline. And if buyer does not cancel the REPSI by the due diligence or the finance and appraisal deadline and haven't closed on the sale of their property, then they can cancel on this prior to the settlement deadline, whereupon the earnest money is released. And that's all they get. Again, liquidated damages. So it does not constitute a default. All right. And then we've got other things that just talk about when it's going to be, listed, who's the listing agent, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But this is the primary concerns about it. We're going to cancel prior to those deadlines, whichever is later. Or if we fail to, we're going to at least cancel before the settlement deadline so that it's not a default, which would put us at greater risk. Okay, if we go to the FHA VA loan addendum, this is one that I'm going to have to add here. So let's add this one. All right, so it says we're, the typical FHA VA stuff. It's going to be our primary residence. Whether it's FHA or VA, doesn't matter. The same terms are in here. And this one here says, regardless of the financing and appraisal deadline, the buyer shall not be obligated to complete the purchase of the property or incur any penalty or forfeiture of the earnest money deposit if, for a VA loan, the purchase price exceeds the reasonable value of the property established by the VA appraisal, or if it's an FHA loan. Again, it's an FHA, the purchase price is higher than the FHA appraisal. However, the buyer does have the right, regardless of the appraisal value, to complete the sale if they want to. They're just not obligated to. All right. So if we want to cancel this based on basically the only thing that allows us to cancel here is that value there, then again, we can go back to this and say, hey, the value didn't come in on our appraisal. So regardless of whether we have passed our appraisal deadline or anything like that, this FHA VA loan language usually follows after the REPSI. And so this language typically trumps the language that's written in the REPSI. So basically our earnest money is protected here if we cancel based on the FHA VA loan addendum. All right, then we've got a secondary backup contract addendum. We're going to have to add a form to that as well. Okay, we're going to add that one.
Hey, Eric, can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So my understanding on the FHA addendum from financing side is you can't amend out of that right to cancel. In other words, you can't do a secondary addendum saying, by the way, we're going to exclude these provisions in the FHA addendum for the refundability of earnest money based on appraisal. Is that what you would understand on the real estate side? I mean, certainly from a financing piece, that wouldn't work, but how would that be approached on the real estate side?
I've honestly never gotten a training on it. Here's my concerns with it is we're talking federal rules. Okay. And so when I'm going to share the screen. Sorry, I like to see people when we're talking, but in this case, we're looking at this actual addendum. Okay. The question here is, could I, as a buyer, negotiate away my rights? And, or could I, as a seller, negotiate a buyer's rights away from them? And again, I haven't gotten a training on this. I don't know if any of you guys have, you're welcome to share it here. But when we're dealing with federal stuff, my thought would be that I don't know if you could. I don't know if you could negotiate away those rights, whether you're a buyer or a seller, because the federal rules are typically, when we get into federal stuff, it's pretty strong. So what Alan's saying is, if we've got an FHA VA addendum, let's say addendum 1, and we come in with addendum 2 and say the FHA VA addendum 1, section 3 does not apply. Can you negotiate away those rights? I honestly don't know if you could. Alan, do you know if has anybody been to a training like that?
I can tell you, I've had people ask me about it a lot, and my understanding is the same as what you're saying, Eric. And I mean, the language in the addendum, the notwithstanding the financing appraisal deadline if applicable, it doesn't address in there one way or the other. If somebody did try and do that with an addendum, it would essentially nullify the FHA VA addendum. And in order to close on an FHA or VA loan, you'd have to have a subsequent addendum reinstating that clause. But I have people ask me about it all the time. My answer has always been, I don't think that that's going to fly for the financing, but I guess you can contract for anything you want and then go get sued about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if you, I really don't know if you can.
Waved away.
Yeah, like you said, it nullifies that VA addendum. And I don't know that we get the right to change those rules. And that same concept applies in, like, let's say, for example, I've got a trampoline in my backyard. And any of the neighborhood kids that want to jump on my trampoline, they have to sign a waiver that I'm not liable for their broken arms. Okay. And so they can sign that waiver. Is it valid or is it enforceable? If that neighbor kid jumps off and breaks their arm and I get sued, can I take that to court and say, sorry, they signed a waiver? Every attorney I've ever talked to said, nope, you can't sign away those basic rights. Okay. So if we apply that to other things in real estate, let's say it's disclosures. I know a whole bunch of shit about my home, but I don't want to provide it. I know a lot of material defects about the home, but I don't want to provide it. Can I negotiate that away? Well, we have a section in there, but according to and I may have given this advice. In fact, I think I remember, 10 years ago giving the wrong advice. But according to the UAR attorneys on the legal panels that I've been a part of, you can't negotiate that away because it's part of state law. You have to disclose any material knowledge you have about a home. So changing the contract, saying that I don't have to disclose it, doesn't change state law. So I could change a contract, but somebody could still sue me because I'm protected under state law. And I think the same thing might come into play here. Is I could negotiate away that FHA VA addendum, but it doesn't change the federal rule that that's got to be there. So if I do want to close with an FHA or VA loan, like Alan said, I'm going to have to reinstate it. So does anybody know anything different than that? Okay, so we've covered the backup contract. Or no, I think that's where we were. So if we go to the cancellation, we're down here to the secondary backup contract, section 1.3. So let's go down there. Buyer's right to cancel at any time prior to the backup contract becoming the primary contract. We can cancel this by providing written notice to the seller. What written notice? This right here. Okay. So we're in backup position. We're going to shop, looking for other homes. We don't know if the first people will perform or not. And so we're continuing on with life. And we're looking at other homes. We find another home that we really like. Great. We want to move forward with that. So we're going to make an offer on this other home and we get accepted with that offer. We want to immediately cancel our backup contract that is in place already, right? Any questions on that one? And then our last one for our deep dive is the short sell, which we actually might see some of these. Here's the short sale addendum. Might see some of these coming around next year again. And boy, it's been a while since we've seen this form. All right, buyer's right to cancel, again, laid out very clearly here, where you can cancel before the due diligence deadline or after. In which case, you know, it just dictates whether or not earnest money is the sole remedy available to the seller. All right. So if this is basically how this one comes to play, if this does come about, we start getting to more short sales, I'll do a detailed training on this. But basically this addendum is added to any short sale property because there's third parties that have to approve that. Okay. And so if we're sitting around waiting for an approval, we have the right to cancel in our sole discretion. If the buyer hasn't closed on the sale of the buyer's property by providing written notice to seller no later than the due diligence deadline. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Short sale addendum. Sorry. Okay, short sale addendum. Again, we've got third party approval like I was talking about, approval by buyer, and then we've got a couple different ways in here that we can cancel. So let's see, where is it? This just acknowledges that it's a short sale. Acknowledges that there's going to be third parties that have to approve it. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through this. Seller and buyer shall have until the third party approval deadline to get that approval. If approval has not been obtained, the REPSI shall automatically be deemed canceled and the earnest money would be returned. Seller can accept backup offers. This is the part right here that applies to us based on cancellation. Because it can be a significant time delay in getting that third party approval, circumstances can change. Okay. And some of those circumstances could be mortgage rates change and we no longer qualify for the loan. Financial circumstances of seller or buyer can change. You know, we could be going into bankruptcy, something like that for the seller. The timing of the transaction may no longer meet the buyer's or seller's needs. It's been a 6-month approval process and sorry, we've had to move along. Buyer can find another property that better meets their needs. Seller could get additional offers that better address their needs. They could get higher offers. On any of those reasons, prior to that third party approval, the buyer or seller could determine that their circumstances have changed and it's no longer in their best interest to pursue this property. They can cancel by providing written notice, in which case the earnest money would be returned to the buyer and that's fair and reasonable and that's all they get. Okay, so we've gone all over today, all of the different reasons that somebody could cancel, and appropriately in each of those reasons, it says that we're going to provide written notice. And so this is the form that gives that written notice. If there's a different reason down here, then we could do other and put it in here. I would be, you know, this is one that you want to be hesitant to use. And one of the quick rules, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. One of the things that you want to avoid doing is giving lengthy explanations as to why you're canceling. Okay. We have a checkbox and a reason right there, and that's all. Because you still have a fiduciary duty for confidentiality. And so let's say that my buyer changes their mind. And I know they're qualified for a loan. I know that the value came in, but they just changed their mind. But we're prior to the finance and appraisal deadline. Okay. Can I call up the listing agent and just commiserate a little bit and say, man, I'm so frustrated with these guys. I've shown them homes for 6 months. This home is the perfect home for them. And their parents talked them into moving into their basement. It's the perfect home. cleared appraisal. I know they're qualified for the loan. They're just changing their mind. I'm so sorry, Mr. Seller, seller's agent. You know, I mean, I'll make it this up to you. I'll take you out to dinner. What's the problem, guys? Have I violated my fiduciary duty to my client? Have I set them up for a potential lawsuit?
You basically just told them that they could go through with it.
Yeah. Now, can we still legally cancel? Again, if I share the screen and we go back here to our contract and we go to the real estate purchase contract, the reason that I gave was that we've canceled based on finance and appraisal. So I'm down here. Okay, financing is required. And buyer's right to cancel before the financing appraisal deadline if buyer and buyer's sole discretion is not satisfied with the terms and conditions of the loan. In their sole discretion, they've changed their mind. Payments are 25 cents more than they would be happy with. It's their sole discretion. We could cancel this contract. Okay. But if I came down here and wrote obviously that would be a problem, right? If I typed in something like that, you know, but what if I said, you know, buyer changed their mind and decided to move in with parents, even though they're qualified? Would we ever put that in writing? No, we wouldn't. So if we're not going to put that in writing, don't say it either. Because even though we have the right by contract to cancel based on our sole discretion, and that might be frustrating to you, and you're not going to be working with this person because they're moving in with their mom and dad, you still have a fiduciary duty that extends. And so if you run into that agent later at a board event and you feel the need to commiserate and say, yeah, they were even qualified, that agent goes back to their seller and says, man, these guys canceled and I know that they were qualified. I talked to their agent. Okay. Folks, this happens all the time. Agents commiserating with each other, and you just can't do that. Okay. You have this fiduciary duty of confidentiality. And so if my buyer decides to cancel, I cancel. And if the seller says, why are they canceling? What kind of things can I say? They've asked me a direct question. Can I lie? Folks, can I lie?
You don't have to lie, but you don't have to be, you could just say it was their sole discretion and it was before the deadline.
Yeah. So if they say, well, why are they canceling? You know, what's their reasoning? We're willing to work with them. We want to get this home sold. We want to make it work. Tell us what the reason is. I'm sorry.
Not at liberty to.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not at liberty to discuss it. So we can't lie. And I have agents all the time ask me this, but what if they ask you directly? Okay, that's silly. All right. It's like if I go to a listing agent and say, tell me right now, what is the bottom line, the very lowest amount that your seller would be willing to accept? I'm asking you directly. Silly, right? When we put it in terms like that, it's silly. And yet all the time agents come to me saying, well, if they were asked directly, like, for example, did this used to be a meth home? It's been certified as decontaminated by the state. There's a specific law that says that this is no longer a material fact because it has been certified as decontaminated. And they asked me directly. Same concept. Okay. I don't answer that question. Sorry, I'm not at liberty to discuss that. It is currently decontaminated. That's all I know is there is currently no contamination from meth. So anyways, folks, this was, I think, a good deep dive. We've kept it to about an hour in the conversation. Are there any other questions that you guys have? I really like this deep dive, keeping it to buyer's cancellation. We were also going to talk about a subject to seller acquiring new residents. I think I can do a separate YouTube video on that one, but this one serves its purpose for diving in deep to the forms and seeing all the different ways that a buyer can cancel, what those cancellations mean, how to protect your buyer, even if they fail to cancel prior to the finance and appraisal deadline, why it's still important for you to cancel prior to settlement. So we've gone through a lot of stuff here. Did you guys find this valuable? Yeah? Okay,
Yes.
good discussion. I appreciate you guys being involved. I learned a new thing as well about no more withdrawn status. Active no-show is the new term that's hip with all the kids. So I appreciate you guys sharing with me as well. Alan, thank you again for being on here and sharing your thoughts from the lender standpoint.
Thanks, Eric. Super helpful. That's great information. I always enjoy learning about this stuff. Helps everybody to do a better job.